We are in the thick of console release season, and while we know a lot about this round's consoles, we actually know less than we usually do. We know that there's a new Xbox with a name that, you know what, it doesn't matter. And we know that there's a PS5. We actually know everything that's inside these things. We know what they look like. We've actually seen most of the games that are coming out at launch. But what we don't know is the price or the release date for either of these. There's guesses, there's leaks, but there's nothing official. And everyone is dying to know the price, because everyone knows that price is going to determine who wins the console war this round. Or is it exclusive games? But either way, we have to know, because that's the only thing that matters. Except, I'm here to tell you that it really doesn't matter. Well, at least not as much as you think it does. It was my dad that got me into video games. Growing up, he had a PlayStation. He bought me a Super Nintendo a year or so before the Nintendo 64 came out. He got a PS2 and he bought me a Nintendo 64. I have this weird memory of him playing a Boys to Men CD for me on the PS2. I know that that's kind of really random, but it's just those memories that just stick out on your brain. That's one of them for me. He was also the person that bought me my Xbox 360. I remember picking it up at Circuit City, if you remember those. I had gotten really into the Xbox 360 viral marketing campaign. You know that one that ended with that Elijah Wood-led event on MTV? Yeah, that was a thing. But all my friends had Xbox, and I was really into the idea of the social features and gamer score. In fact, my dad bought me a PS3 Slim near the end of that generation, and I sold it less than 8 months later because it never got used. At the time, I was just more interested in playing Xbox games with my dorm mates. And honestly, my experience of that console generation kind of mirrors how things went down, at least in the US. At the launch of the 360 and the PS3, the 360 quickly outsold Sony. Sony's price and developer experience were frankly awful. Xbox had social features, they had gamer score, and I know that sounds silly, but it was new. And also, something that I think worked really well for them was Xbox Live Arcade. And that brought in indie developers as well as established developers and really reached out to that community, bringing a bunch of really great games to the platform. Eventually, PS3 would catch up by figuring out their developer stuff and honestly figuring out their pricing issues. The thing that actually helped them catch up the most, though, was console exclusives. They nailed down exclusive games about midway through this console cycle, and that helped them catch up to Xbox 360. In fact, by the end of the generation, they had outsold Xbox 360 by a couple million or so. Short versions of the story of this console generation will not tell you that part, and shout out to a video from Mystic, which I'll link, for telling me about it. Now let's not forget Nintendo, because as all this was happening, Nintendo was out there outselling everyone by 20 million units. If this was a console war, they were winning by not fighting in it. Let's jump to the 8th gen. The Xbox focused on TV and Kinect, and that was a mistake. They didn't pay attention to their core audience, gamers. The PS4 sorted out the developer mistakes of the PS3 and also was priced well. This made Xbox's lack of exclusive games really apparent. The PS4 clearly outsold the Xbox at launch. Xbox did some things to catch up, but they never got even close to PS4. Sony clearly won if this was a competition. What were some of those things that Microsoft could do? Well, the one that they've done lately is Game Pass, which, if you don't know, is a very cheap $10 subscription, at least on Xbox, that gives you access to a bunch of games, including Xbox Studios games. It alleviates the pressure of having to buy a $60 game every time something from Xbox Studios comes out. Again, in this generation, Nintendo was not fighting in the same war. The Wii U flopped pretty hard, we all know that, but Nintendo followed it up just a few years later with the Nintendo Switch. And if you don't know, the Nintendo Switch has been a smash hit. If they were in this war, they would clearly have won it. But here's a hint for you. It's not a war, and it never was. And that brings us to this generation of consoles. So here's where we are. You've got PS5 and you have Xbox Series X. They've got eerily similar specs and architectures based on an AMD Zen 2 core, if that matters to you. PS5 has a digital and disc-based version. There's a Xbox Series S, which has been rumored and leaked, but Microsoft has not yet actually announced. Beats me why they won't just announce it. PS5 looks like Doctor Strange. Xbox Series X looks like a refrigerator. PS5 is actually shipping something that's reminiscent of that battering concept controller from a while back. And the Xbox Series X controller looks a lot like the Xbox One S and One X controller. They just kind of like tightened up the top corners and added a share button. Honestly, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But something both Sony and Microsoft have done over the past few years is gobble up a bunch of game studios. And they've sunk that power into creating a bunch of killer exclusive titles. In the games that we've seen, the consensus seems to be that Sony has the best ones, and they seem to be closest to done. So going into the next console generation, we have two very similar pieces of hardware. Sony's has better exclusives, we guess, and no news on price. Maybe Sony's is more expensive, but not like PS3 expensive. And honestly, the price stuff changes every week anyway. Okay, so maybe at this point we can say that Sony wins the console war. Not so fast. This is where we're going to talk about Game Pass. So like I said, both Microsoft and Sony acquired a bunch of game studios. And while Sony has spent their time with those studios developing games and selling those games in a traditional way, Microsoft has sold those games, but also put those games into Game Pass. And this points at their strategy. If we want to know more about this strategy, we can look at a recent blog post from head of Xbox Phil Spencer. That blog post made a bunch of promises. And in those promises were a few that I think we should look at. The first is that all Xbox Game Studios games are going to arrive to Xbox Game Pass on day one. That means if you're a Game Pass member, you don't have to go buy the game to play it on the day it comes out. You can just rely on your Game Pass membership. The second is that you won't be forced into the next console generation because all games released in the next couple of years by Xbox Game Studios will be playable on the Xbox One series of consoles. There was also a promise that all Xbox One games that do not require Kinect will be backward compatible on the Xbox Series X. A promise that your Xbox One accessories will come with you to Xbox Series X, including controllers. And really interestingly, a promise that if you buy games on Xbox One, they will upgrade to Xbox Series X at no cost. I believe this promise is mostly for first-party games, and some third-party games are making that promise as well. Another piece of this puzzle is Xbox Game Pass streaming, formerly known as xCloud. This streams the video from a video game to your phone or your tablet and streams controls from, say, an Xbox controller from your phone or your tablet to the cloud, letting you play Xbox games, full Xbox games like Gears 5 on your phone or tablet. Many of Xbox first-party games are in that service. And if you're a part of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, then you can get that on your Android phone. I believe that's $15 a month, where the Xbox-only plan is $10 a month and the PC-only plan is $5 a month. Now, many people have pointed out that it sure seems like Microsoft does not want you to buy an Xbox. Chris Plant from Polygon put it this way: Game Pass is Microsoft's ultimate Xbox exclusive. It's not about the individual games, it's about the subscription. But you have options. You can play these games on PC, or you can play them on your existing Xbox One X or One S, at least for the next couple years. Or if you can stream them to your phone or tablet because you have an Android device, then you can do that. Or if you want to buy an Xbox Series X or the inevitable Xbox Series S that is coming, but they haven't announced yet, who knows why, then you can do that too. So right, as long as I buy the games or have a Game Pass subscription, then Microsoft still makes money. Often more money from an individual person than they did in the last generation, because most people in the last generation didn't buy a console in the first place, so they never bought the games. But if they're releasing a new Xbox, or two of them, then clearly they secretly want you to buy an Xbox, right? Why else would they make one? And that, my friends, is what this video is about, and that is what I want to talk about today. So there's two possible reasons for why they could be doing this. The first is that you sign up for Game Pass on your PC or your Android phone and you start playing in the ecosystem. Eventually, something comes out that's Xbox only and that you want to play, and you buy the hardware. The second is the hardware itself is marketing that drives interest in the Xbox ecosystem. That drives sales not only in hardware, but also in games and Game Pass subscriptions on PC, mobile, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X and S. And this is where I think that knowing the price of these consoles matters. Because if Xbox Series X is priced aggressively, let's say $399, which has been the going rumor until recently, then the profit margins per unit are not high enough for option one to be a viable strategy. But if the price is, say, $599, which has been the rumor in the past week, then option one does open up. I don't think that that writes off option 2 as a possibility. It just doesn't make as much sense to me. Like I said, most rumors suggest that both the Series S and Series X will be aggressively priced. And that's why I think Microsoft is probably viewing Xbox hardware as simply a front door to Game Pass subscriptions and game sales. I bet that they even take a loss on hardware. And I know I'm going to get comments about how subscriptions all suck. And if that's you, you don't have to pay for subscriptions that you don't want. Especially in this scenario, you can just buy the games. But you know what I think is just like super neat about Game Pass? Imagine this. Let's say there's a $250 to $300 Xbox Series S. And imagine they keep like the Xbox One S around that's sub $200. And the Xbox Game Pass subscription that's Xbox only is $10 a month. That opens up the hobby of gaming to people at an extremely low price. Especially in a world where individual games are $60 and some publishers have been pushing to make that $70 in this generation. And also, from what we've heard about how developers are compensated for putting their games into Xbox Game Pass, I think this could be a really great way to actually fund development of more games. Look, we have all the pieces now. Microsoft is playing a completely different game. They are selling Game Pass, not Xbox hardware. PS5 is continuing to play the same winning strategy they did before. And honestly, it's gonna work for them. I think the PS5 looks like a great machine. Just from a product perspective, I find it boring because it's been done before. Nintendo, they're out there killing it and selling 22 million copies of Animal Crossing in 2020. They're doing great. But the thing about the games industry right now, no one is in the same fight. Microsoft took a note from Nintendo and did its own damn thing this time. And we'll see how that plays out, but I personally think it's going to work for them. At least at the launch of the Xbox Series X and PS5, not a single one of these companies is in the same fight. None of them are playing the same game. And I personally hope that that means the console wars are over for good.
So you chipped your nail, you stubbed your toe, you lost your phone. Life's a rolling stone on a broken roller coaster. Okay. It's all good, move on. Throw your hands up, move on. It's all good, today's your day.
Hey y'all, it's Matt. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please like it on YouTube, please subscribe, and please share the video with your friends if you thought it was that interesting. I will see y'all next time.
Hey, here I go, ready now. I'm coming for you, can't nothing stop me. I got some things I gotta do. Hey, 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 hey. I'm making a move. Study long, ain't nothing gonna happen on its own. I'm making a move. Don't need no angels for this song. I got joy all through my soul. I'm making a move. Get up, get out. Mr. Sun is shining on me. I'm making a move. Got my lucky charms, time to move along. Yeah, I'm making a move. Move out my way, devil.